Tonight, I'll talk to a counsellor who's been banned from talking to staff and been re-educated after asking why the trans and gay pride flag had to fly every day, plus the politician pushing to axe a state-based Aboriginal voice now that Australians have voted no to dividing us by race. Also tonight, bad news today on inflation, what that is going to mean for you. Plus, yet another popular camping site is banned as heritage laws bite. And our Wednesday regular, Patrick Christie's. But first, what an embarrassment at the National Press Club today, particularly from the ABC. It really should apologise. Because there was the Israeli ambassador saying what he'd seen, evidence of the terrible atrocities Hamas terrorists inflicted a couple of weeks ago on Jewish civilians, men, women, and even children, including unspeakable cruelties on a pregnant woman and her unborn child. Now, I'm not going to describe everything again, the tortures and the murders. It's just, I've only just too much. But I will give you a hint. It's this recording of one of the Hamas terrorists who used the phone of a Jewish woman he'd killed that day to ring his mother and dad back in Gaza, all excited.
بكلمك من جوال يهودية قتلتها وقتلت جوزها.
الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر ولله الحمد.
يابا افتح الوقت شوف كيف قتلت يابا. افتح بتدفع عليك وقت كله وين بروح. ربنا معك بالسلامة يابا أشوفك بالحين يابا. يابا والله 10 قتلت 10 بيدي يابا. يابا على ايدي اعطيني امي يما يصنيك يما.
Wow. And don't think that this massacre, as well as the kidnapping of more than 200 Israelis, including very young children who are now being used as hostages and human shields, don't think that that wasn't ordered from the very top of Hamas, the terrorist group that runs Gaza. Here's one of several terrorists Israel captured.
التعميمات في بخصوص المدنيين كانت اللي هو يعني قتل الرجال، الأسر اللي هو النساء والمسنين والأطفال.
The ambassador was going through all this at the press club in Canberra, asking why this kind of horror didn't seem to move people. Why it was Israel that was now being put in the dock as the real villain? Yet, incredibly, up bobbed journalist after journalist during the questions afterwards to exactly prove his point, very hostile. But the ABC journalist Chantelle Al-Khouri, who has a Syrian flag in her Twitter profile, she made crystal clear that she'd picked her side in this religious and racial conflict. Here's her first question.
You've said in your speech today that Israel does not want to kill the Palestinian people and poses no threat to them. Don't these comments contradict your statement and instead demonstrate the Israeli government's blatant disregard for Palestinian civilians?
Now, that last bit sounds like a statement, not a question at all. Blatant disregard for Palestinian civilians. I mean, seriously? I mean, nothing Israel has done to civilians comes close to the wanton evil that Hamas has done to Jewish ones. But it is true, Palestinian civilians are also dying in this war, even though Israel has warned them to get out of the way. Hamas doesn't offer that little escape. Now, the reason that there are these deaths is that Hamas has hidden its military assets in schools and hospitals and in crowded streets, and has ordered Palestinian civilians not to flee because they want that human shield factor. They want dead Palestinians to make Israel seem the villain. But none of this cuts ice, apparently, with that ABC journalist who followed up with this extraordinary question or statement.
You're speaking about defence there, and we've heard that being said for the past 2 weeks, that notion that Israel has a right to defend itself. But what does that actually look like? Where is the line crossed? What number of Palestinian people killed is a satisfactory number for the Israeli government? And considering there are more than 5,000, including children, that have been killed, where is that line drawn?
What number of Palestinians killed is a satisfactory number for the Israeli government? How many children would be satisfactory? I mean, how sick is that? It's not just talking about a cull. Now, Israel has made it obvious that it is trying to wipe out Hamas, not civilians, the terrorists, not civilians. It is no satisfactory number of Palestinian civilians who wants dead. I mean, Hamas may find it satisfactory to kill Jews, including children, and ring mum and dad about how exciting it all was, but not one person in Israel that I've seen finds it satisfactory to kill Palestinian children. I mean, that question is just malicious. Bias doesn't even come close to describing it. The ABC should apologise to the ambassador for sending someone with such an obvious agenda to attack him on TV. But it was, if only it was just activists, journalists turning Israel from victim to villain after 1,400 of its citizens were deliberately butchered, many tortured and raped. If only it was that. Unfortunately, the United Nations, it's disgraced itself again. And this time it was its Secretary General, socialist politician Antonio Guterres, with his yes, but routine, yes, it was terrible what Hamas did to those Jews, but those Jews are still in some way to blame for what was done to them. And by the way, they're now committing war crimes.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
What a sick puppy. Israel's ambassador to the UN said Guterres should resign.
You, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Hamas, as the minister explained, beheaded babies, burned families, raped women, abducted kids, babies, Holocaust survivors. And the SG is blaming the victim? You are blaming Israel? This is a pure blood libel. This is a pure blood libel, and I think that the Secretary General must resign.
Now, it is true some democracies are coming to Israel's support. France, Britain, United States, us to a qualified extent. But once again, increasingly it's seeming that if Jews don't defend themselves, very few other people will. And just look now, look at our government. Our Foreign Minister Penny Wong calling for a humanitarian pause in the fighting so aid can get to the Palestinians. In truth, that's a pause that helps Hamas as well, helps delay the invasion, helps Hamas prepare for the Israeli invasion to kill more soldiers, helps Hamas build more pressure on the world in the meantime to stop Israel, which you see now, helps exploit fears for the hostages it took so people get more scared of going in, helps turn on the heat on Israel in the meantime, the land of those Jews who dare to fight back. And they really shouldn't, because win or lose, aren't the Jews always to blame? I mean, just look at some of the media coverage. These are dark days, I'm afraid.